Hi everyone! So not too long ago, we took a look at the two types of vining philodendron, climbers versus crawlers. So today I thought we would look at what some people refer to as non-vining philodendron, though scientifically I'm not sure that's entirely accurate. But scientifically these are what are called self-heading philodendron, and you may also hear them referred to sometimes as upright philodendron or bush philodendron, and that is because they grow in a much more compact and upright fashion, kind of like a bush. Now within this category, there used to be kind of a subcategory of these types of philodendron that were referred to as arborescent. And that basically just means tree-like, meaning that they grow more like a tree with more of a trunk foundation, getting taller and spreading out at the top. However, some years back, all of those arborescent type philodendron were actually reclassified into the genus Thimatophyllum. So that's why we're not going to be covering any of those plants today, but maybe in the future I might do a video just specifically on those. So let's talk about the growth pattern for these upright philodendron first, then I'll touch a little bit on the basic care requirements, and then we're going to take a look at 10 of some of the most beautiful varieties of these types of philodendron. So self-heading philodendron are terrestrial in nature, meaning that they grow on the forest floor, not unlike the crawling philodendron that we've looked at before. However, when it comes to self-heading philodendron, the space between their nodes is much smaller, and they have a much thicker trunk, if you will, which is why they grow so much more compact. However, don't be fooled when I say compact, because a lot of these plants we're going to be looking at today are potentially going to take up way more space in your home than any of the crawling philodendron that we looked at before. And that's because even though these upright philodendrons stay very short, their growth actually radiates out from a central point, and that ends up making them very broad plants. So you're definitely going to need to make sure you have plenty of space in your home for these plants. Now, when it comes to the care requirements for self-heading philodendron, it's pretty similar to the care requirements for the crawling philodendron, except that you don't need some kind of long pot for them because they're not trying to crawl in their growth pattern. But they are going to want a very well draining soil, but still one that retains a bit of moisture. And I think that these philodendron are the ones that want the most light out of all philodendrons. So bright indirect light is going to be your best friend when caring for these plants. Now, interestingly enough, most of the upright philodendron that are on the market today, or that you're going to see people already have in their homes, are actually hybrids. They're all crosses between several different varieties of philodendron, including one philodendron that is inherently a self-heading philodendron. But let's go ahead and get started looking at some of these beautiful plants, and I am going to shift over a little bit so that I can flash them up on screen for you. So I want to start with what I think is one of the most interesting upright philodendrons in terms of shape of the leaves, coloring. It is variegated, very beautiful variegation on this plant. Just overall look, it's very unique looking, and that is the Philodendron Ring of Fire. And we did get to see some of these in my recent plant shop tour of cultivar. And as you can see here, even though these are just baby ones, and they will get a lot bigger, and we'll talk about size next, but very beautiful plant with kind of this speckly orangish variegation on it and that toothed shape to that leaf. Absolutely love this plant. Now, because I did say that these plants are going to take up a significant amount of space for you guys, I am going to give you a ballpark range for like mature size for all of these plants today, so you kind of have a good idea of what I'm talking about. However, as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, these are relatively short philodendron. They're going to be the shortest philodendron that are out there. So for this one in particular, you're going to be looking at probably a max height of about 3 feet. However, total width, or I should probably say circumference, because most of these grow in a round shape. So we'll say overall circumference can get all the way up to 4 feet. And that's pretty wide. But if you're hearing me say that and thinking, oh my gosh, I'm never going to be able to own any of these plants she's talking about today because I just don't have enough space, there are some that are a bit more dwarf in nature that are on this list. So just hang on, I'll get to some of those here in a bit. Now, interestingly enough, the Philodendron Ring of Fire is actually a cross between two philodendrons, one of which is the next philodendron we're going to look at, and that is the Philodendron Wendlandii. And as you can see, quite different looking than the Philodendron Ring of Fire. Obviously, this is not where the Ring of Fire gets its toothed look from, but you can see how this plant does have those very long kind of lance-shaped leaves, and it's just a beautiful solid green color. But what I really like about this plant is that the leaves kind of grow a little bit further apart from each other, and it kind of makes it look almost like flower petals to me versus plant leaves, if you will. I just think it has a very clean, beautiful look, and that's something I really appreciate about this plant. Now, as far as size for the Wendlandii goes, It is only going to get probably about max 3 feet tall, and it's not going to get quite as wide as that Philodendron Ring of Fire. The Ring of Fire was about 4 feet wide at maturity. This one's probably only going to get to about 3 feet wide, so you're saving at least 1 foot of space. But if you like the lance-shaped look to these leaves, and you like the fact that it's all green, but you also really liked that toothed look to the Ring of Fire, then the next plant is going to be perfect for you. And that is the Philodendron Tiger Tooth. So as you can see, beautiful dark green leaves on this plant. They are lance-shaped leaves, and it is toothed, although it is a little bit less deep of a toothing than on that Ring of Fire, but still absolutely beautiful. Makes for a very unique looking plant, and this one actually is probably only going to get maybe about 2 feet high. If you have like super great conditions in your home, maybe it'll reach 3 feet high, but it is going to spread out broadly like all of these plants do and can get up to a maximum circumference of about 3 feet. But once again, a great option if you're looking for that all green foliage, but you like that more unique leaf shape. Now this next upright philodendron that we're going to look at is actually one of my favorites on this list today, and that is the Philodendron Black Cardinal. And if you're a fan of dark foliage, like super dark foliage, this is definitely the one for you. But I absolutely love how dark this plant is. I mean, it looks black practically, hence why it's called a black cardinal. But it is also called a black cardinal because when those leaves first come in, they're actually a very, very stunning reddish color. They then darken into this almost black coloring as they mature. So always very interesting looking plant. Definitely a showstopper if there's a new leaf being put out. I mean, somebody walks in your home, they're gonna notice that bright red against that black from a mile away and be like, what is that plant? Now, as far as size goes on this one, once again, probably gonna max out about 3 feet tall, and this one's probably gonna max out at about 3 feet wide as well. Now, if black leaves are not your thing, but you kind of liked the shape of these leaves and kind of the overall look of the plant, but just weren't into the color, then the next plant might be a good option for you because it is very similar to the Philodendron Black Cardinal, but we don't get quite as dark on those leaves. We have a little bit more green to us, and that is the Philodendron Imperial Red. And look at this plant. And can I also just say for a second that I absolutely love this photo. This is like absolutely fabulous. This is like what you need to carry down the aisle at a wedding as a bouquet. Maybe that's just me. But anyways, as you can see, very similar leaf shapes to that Philodendron Black Cardinal, but the leaves are a lot lighter. They are that greenish color. It is still kind of a darker green, but nowhere near that blackish type coloring we were looking at a second ago. But those new leaves still come in that gorgeous, gorgeous shade of red, and then over time they turn into that green as they mature. But in case you couldn't tell from this photo, this is gonna be a big one. So this one actually can get up to 4 feet tall as well as 4 feet wide. So obviously an absolutely stunning plant. Look at it. This would be a great central feature in a room if you have space for it. But I absolutely love it. I think it's gorgeous. Now there's also an all green version of this plant known as the Philodendron Imperial Green. And as you can see, completely green. If all you want is green leaves, this is definitely the one for you, especially if you like that broader leaf shape with that nice rippled kind of texturing to it. And this is also a much lighter green than that Imperial Red was that we were looking at, but still a stunning plant. And of course the size is going to be the same as with the Imperial Red, so probably maxing out around 4 feet high and 4 feet wide. But it is going to take a while, you guys, for the plant to get to that point. I probably should have mentioned that earlier on. These plants aren't going to like mature overnight, but definitely just keep in mind that they are going to get big one day, so you really need to make sure you have space for them. But let's move on to a plant of yet another color, and this is going to be one of the smaller ones on this list today, and that is the Philodendron Moonlight. Probably called that because this plant almost looks like it's glowing with this beautiful yellowish green coloring. And you can probably tell that this plant is growing a little bit more compactly. The leaves are a lot closer together. They're overlapping. They're not as big in terms of like the overall shape of the leaf. And so this plant is actually going to stay pretty small. It is only going to get to be 2 feet high by 2 feet wide. And that's half as big as the last two we looked at. But if you are into that kind of neon yellowish greenish coloring on a plant, such as you would see on a neon pothos or a lemon lime philodendron, and you want an upright philodendron, this is definitely the one I would recommend for you. But moving on to yet another color, and maybe I should have mentioned at the start of this video that there are a lot of color options when it comes to upright philodendron. But this next one is kind of gaining in popularity lately, I feel like, and I see them a lot of places. So this should be relatively easy for you guys to find, and that is the Philodendron Prince of Orange. Called the Prince of Orange because these leaves come in this beautiful shade of orange, and then over time as they mature, they turn into this lovely kind of lightest shade of green. Now this one is going to be one of our slightly bigger ones, but not horribly bad. It's probably going to max out somewhere between 2 to 3 feet in height and 3 feet in width. So next I think we'll take a look at yet one more toothed variety of upright philodendron, and that is the Philodendron Pluto. And what I like about this plant is that it is kind of a little bit of a combination in terms of look of a lot of the plants that we've already looked at. So it has that toothed, long-shaped leaf, very similar to that ring of fire that we looked at. Its leaves also come in this kind of reddish orangish color, which is similar to the plant we just looked at, as well as like the Imperial Red that we looked at, and then it matures and becomes greener over time. However, one of the things that I think is interesting and a bit more unique about the Philodendron Pluto is that it actually gets taller than it does wide, which is very different than most of the ones that we have looked at so far. So this plant can get all the way up to 4 feet tall, but it's probably going to max out at 3 feet wide. So that's going to give you a little bit of a different kind of overall look than the previous ones that we've looked at. So up next is a plant that was very popular a few years back. I do feel like it is kind of waning in popularity now, but I wouldn't be doing my due diligence if I didn't include it on this list because it is one of the easiest to find upright philodendrons, and that is the Philodendron Birkin. And as you can see, a very different look from the ones that we've looked at so far. This is also sometimes, I believe, referred to as a white wave philodendron because of that variegation that creates those white lines on those leaves. And as you can see, these leaves are a little bit differently shaped than a lot of the other ones that we've looked at before. And this is one of the ones that's going to stay a little bit smaller for you. But similar to the last philodendron we looked at, the Philodendron Pluto, the Birkin also has a tendency to get more tall than it does wide. So this plant is probably going to max out for you around 3 feet tall, but it's only going to get to be about 2 feet wide. So if you are looking for something that's going to take up less horizontal space, this is definitely a great option. Now there are a lot more self-heading philodendron than what we're covering today, you guys, but a lot of them are very similar looking to each other, so I wanted to give you a good variety of plants today to see that had kind of some key differences into them and were very unique versus a bunch that all looked the same. But hopefully you guys have enjoyed this video today. If so, please be sure to click that like and or subscribe button down below. And if you've watched this and decided that upright philodendron just are not for you, and you have not yet checked out my climbing versus crawling philodendron video, you can check that one out next, right here. Thank you so much for joining me today, you guys, and I look forward to seeing you again next time. Aloha!